I wanted to lead with the level of vulnerability that is welcome in this place. And I never want to ask someone to go somewhere that I wouldn't go. At the age of 3, I woke myself up from a nap, I marched my booty downstairs, and I told my mom, I'm ready to accept Jesus now. From a very young age, I was very aware that people knew my last name. Performing was a very, very big part of my life in the tangible, physical, theatrical way, but also in this emotional, church-going way. When I was 9 years old, my dad got his second DUI. I was told that not everyone needs to know about Dad's situation. And he just crawled over to me, and I looked at him and I said, "You did it again." This is the part of my testimony that I haven't really shared, and a lot of people who have known for years don't know. The relationship did not start off that way. Started off very innocent, but teenage hormones happened. Eventually, he stopped caring that I felt so uncomfortable. I felt like no one would believe me, and so I didn't say anything. I'm a Shaw, and oh my gosh, what would anyone say? So then that toys with your brain when it doesn't become consensual. She's just dramatic. She's just too much. She's just this. I don't want to perform anymore. I wanted to see my name in lights, not getting applause, not being in the spotlight, but serving. Am I going to continue to ignore this and be disobedient and probably go and be successful and have a great life? There were a lot of people in my life who said behind my back and also to my face that I was making a mistake. And it's all a testament to God. And He has taken me from brokenness to literally dancing before Him. His name is so much greater than Ady Shaw or Ady Wheeler. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Unveiled the podcast, episode 2. I am so happy that you are here. And just like we said in the first episode, this is a community where we are unveiling the stories of the bride of Christ, because we truly believe that every story is His story, and every story matters to Him. So no matter where you are, no matter who you are welcome here. And I am so happy that you're choosing to join us and listen in today. For those who listened to episode 1, man, thank you so much, first of all. And thank you so much for the tons of comments that I got, the messages, the text messages, people who came up in person and just encouraged me. I truly, I really, really do take that to heart, and I appreciate it. But hearing that so many of you have just been waiting for a platform to be created like this is just a testament to God's faithfulness. And I hope it's an encouragement to some of you who are out there and maybe sleeping on something that you know God is calling you to. Just do it. Because man, seeing Him already get the glory from this, when I was so nervous to take that first step, so nervous to create the podcast and release that first episode, and seeing how He's already working in that, so worth it, and so humbling that He would choose me to do that. And we have so many people lined up to share their stories with you, and these people, they're so diverse. Their stories are so diverse, but they're full of goodness and just amplifying the goodness of God, His love, and His plans that He has for you, and His character. And so I know that we're going to learn so much from those stories. But as we started talking about, me and my husband, as we started talking about where we wanted to go with this podcast and where should I start and what do the first couple episodes look like, I really felt like before we jumped into interviewing other people, that I wanted to lead with the level of vulnerability that is welcome in this place. And I never want to ask someone to go somewhere that I wouldn't go. And so I want to lead with that vulnerability and share my testimony. And to be honest, I have never shared it on a platform this big, especially with a digital footprint. And so a lot of time and prayer and counsel has gone into this episode. And I hope that you feel that. I hope that you know that, but I hope that you feel that. And beyond my story, beyond all the things I've gone through and this and that about me, my personality, my story, my past, what I hope that you hear is a story of God's redemption, a story of his healing power, and the fact that he can take things that were meant to harm you and turn them into something good and something beautiful and something to bring you closer to him and to bring him glory. And so, without further ado, let's get into it. Well, my name is Ady Wheeler, and I grew up in Overland Park, Kansas, and I'm the oldest of 3 children. I have 2 younger siblings, a sister and a brother, and I was raised in a God-fearing family. I'm very blessed, very privileged to say that. And at a very young age, the gospel was introduced to me in a very clear and tangible way. And so actually at the age of 3, I woke myself up from a nap, I marched my booty downstairs, and I told my mom, I'm ready to accept Jesus now. And so I don't know if it was at the age of 3 or a short time after that, but sometime when I was in those elementary years, I accepted Jesus. And I just always had this very tender heart for him. And I just believed that the Holy Spirit was there. And I was the kid on the school bus at 7 sharing my faith and lifting my hands in worship. I just had this very tender heart for the Lord and understood his grace and his compassion for me at such a young age. And I'm very, very grateful for that. I grew up in the Kansas City area, and my family was in the Kansas City area for generations and generations and generations. And my grandpa had a company that was very big, still is relatively big in the Kansas City area. And so from a very young age, I was very aware that people knew my last name and knew me. And in today's culture, that's kind of like a cliche thing to say, but it's true. And especially around my church, my parents were very involved, my grandparents were very involved, my aunts and uncles were very involved. And so whether it was told to me deliberately or whether it was just something that I observed, as a young child, I was very aware that there were eyes on me, and that we were a family to look up to, quote unquote, or set the example for other families in the church. And so that was all fine and dandy, but it did set me on a path of performance and people pleasing. And then to top it all off, I was put into theater and dancing. And so at the age of 3, I was put into a tap and ballet class and fell in love with it. At the age of 6, I was in my first musical as a little baby mouse in Sleeping Beauty and fell in love with theater. And so I was also set on a path of performing theatrically. And so performing was a very, very big part of my life in the tangible, physical, theatrical way, but also in this emotional, church-going way. And so that kind of affected me the most when my family hit what I would consider our first big event. When I was 9 years old, my dad got his second DUI. The first DUI I can't remember, but the second DUI I remember, and I was 9 years old. And living in the state of Kansas, the second one isn't just a slap on the wrist. The second one comes with disciplinary action. That included my dad losing his license. And I remember being so young and innocent to the point where I asked my dad if he could ride his bike with me anymore. I didn't know if he could ride his bike with me because he couldn't drive. So I correlated to that, like, can you ride a bike still? Are we good? And I was told that not everyone needs to know about dad's situation. And looking back at that as an adult, I understand what my parents were saying, because I understand that there's certain things that, as believers, when we're in community, we can do in tighter knit community. But because I think of the awareness that I had around my family's name, maybe because of the culture of the church that I was going to, although I love them, and maybe because of that performance side of me, what I heard was, no one can know about this, and I cannot tell anyone, and we have to act like everything's normal. And so I started stuffing things, and then by the age of 11, it happened again. And this one was a little bit more dramatic. My mom was out of town, and my dad was attending a KU game with some of his high school friends. And it was a big deal that when mom went out of town, all of us kids could take turn sleeping in the king-size bed with my with my parents. And it was like a big deal. And this night was my night, because he was going to be showing up, the latest, and I was the oldest, so I could stay up a little late. And I remember waiting up for him, and we had a babysitter, and he just wasn't coming home. And so I reached for the phone, and I dialed his number, and I thought to myself, I don't want to bother him. I just don't want to bother him. So I hung it up, and before you know it, I woke up and it was morning, and the TV was still on, and I still was on his side of the bed, and he wasn't in bed with me. And when I went downstairs, my dad was sitting in between the couch and the coffee table with his hands in his face in his knees, and he looked horrible. And I awkwardly sat down. My grandparents were there, and he just crawled over to me, and I looked at him and I said, "You did it again." And he was so full of shame. And my heart breaks for him now, like thinking back on that moment. But I was very angry, very hurt, very confused. But in that moment, something snapped in me. And I think that my coping mechanism in that moment became adulting. And so what I did is I packed my siblings' bags, and we were off to a family friend's house to stay, because mom was coming home and the pastors were coming over, and they were going to have to figure out what was next. And so I became little mommy. And we went over, and my parents decided that they were still going to work it out. But my dad had to, again, lose his license. This time it came with jail time. And I was so embarrassed. And it definitely affected my relationship with my dad. And because of that, I think that because of what happened, and, that causing anger between me and my dad, causing a rift between me and my dad, and then also me stepping up and feeling like I had to mature and not be a problem and all these things, I started looking for validation from a male figure. And so I directed that attention to wanting someone to love me and wanting a boyfriend. And so I found myself in a place where, understandably so, I was hurt, I was vulnerable, and I was very codependent, very codependent. And so found myself in a teenage relationship, but treating it with the level of commitment and that someone would a marriage. Because I saw my mom forgive my dad, I thought that that's how relationships work. And granted, forgiveness is a beautiful representation of God's love. We are called as Christians to forgive. But there's a certain level of commitment that a covenant marriage is under and a dating relationship as teenagers are under. And I did not separate the two. And I was just so desperate to be loved that I found myself in a high school relationship that was very manipulative and this is the part of my testimony that, quick side note, this is the part of my testimony that I haven't really shared, and a lot of people who have known for years don't know. Forgive me if it's clunky. But again, I just want the emphasis to be on what God has done. And just like my husband's in the room, he's helping me through this. This is a testament. This is what happened. But this is a testament to what God has done. The relationship did not start off that way. Started off very innocent. But teenage hormones happen, and I found myself in a sexual relationship with this boy, and I felt very, very guilty because of how I was raised and wanting to save absolutely everything for the covenant of marriage and knowing what the Bible said. I felt very, very guilty. And when I wanted to cut that off, he was going to end the relationship. And so I continued. And then I put my foot down and I felt very uncomfortable with what was happening. And eventually he stopped caring that I felt so uncomfortable. And it became very manipulative and very abusive and very damaging. And because of the situation that I was in, and because of the community that I was in, I felt like no one would believe me. And so I didn't say anything. All while this is happening, I am getting more invested in theater, more invested in performing, and known as this drama girl. So that even added more to my feeling that no one would believe me and that I would be the boy who cried wolf. But I never cried wolf to begin with, you know? But just the enemy toying with my brain, that I had to forgive and I had to move on, and, you know, I'm too dirty now, so I have to marry this person. But before my senior year, by the grace of God, this boy decided to break up with me. And I used to look back at that and be so mad that I couldn't make that decision. But I think that God allowed that to happen because honestly, I was not strong enough to make that decision. So he had to make that decision for me. And thank God he did, because I'm glad that it didn't go further than it did. But being left in the rubbles of that in your teenage years and processing through the shame of oh my gosh, I'm proclaiming to be this Christian girl, and I lead worship on Wednesdays and on Sundays. And we professed to be this good Christian, top buttoned couple. And, I'm getting well known in the theater world, and I'm a Shaw, and oh my gosh, what would anyone say? And I just felt so guilty because that's not, I was in the midst of spiritual hypocrisy because I'm professing to be one thing, but then I willingly, in the beginning, willingly got myself into this relationship, and my hormones were raging too, and we entered into that very consensual. And we never went all the way, but I know what the Bible says, and I wanted to save it all for my husband. And so then that toys with your brain when it doesn't become consensual, and you gaslight yourself into thinking like, okay, he can't help himself because, I willingly have done this, and so he's just a guy, I opened that door, and so can't blame him, which is so wrong, so false. Anyone thinking that out there, you're worth so much more. But yeah, just feeling so ashamed and guilty, and knowing that I was professing to be one thing and then behind closed doors hurting and broken and searching for someone to fill that void, someone to love me and accept me for who I was, someone who wouldn't take advantage of me, or misunderstand me, or paint me as this one color of she's just dramatic, she's just too much, she's just this. But understand the depths of who I was. And so right before my senior year, I had signed up to go on a missions trip. And I remember sitting on my back porch with my mom. And at this point, she did not know. She did not know any of this. And just almost panicking to her. Like, I cannot go on this trip. You don't understand. Like, I'm not prepared. I have not, and I passed it off as I've not been in the Word, and I haven't been preparing, and, all these things. And she looked at me and she said, then this is the perfect time for you to go, because you need to realize that God does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called. And if he has called you to this, it's not you that's doing the saving. It's not you that's going to be moving and being powerful. It's God. And I love that trip. I look back, I'm so glad that I went on that trip, because seeing those people in Nicaragua who had nothing, living under a communist government where they could technically be punished for doing certain things with their faith, worshiping the most authentic worship that I have ever seen, and seeing God heal people and speak to me and meet me where I was and use me. It was on that trip that I rededicated my life to Jesus and said, okay, God, you can have it all. You can have it all. All my guilt, all my shame, all my pride. I don't want to perform anymore. I don't want to perform anymore. All I want is you, and I want your will to be done in my life. And so I came back, and that senior year, I was on fire for Jesus. I had a new perspective. I was washed clean. But on top of that, I was on fire and ready to be accepted into a BFA program, because remember, theater was also my life. And so going through that senior year, those were my two like things. It was Jesus and theater, Jesus and theater. And I hope that it was Jesus up here and theater down here, but we were still struggling, and we were still trying to figure out our priorities. But I had started to attend Life Church my senior year, and I'd asked my parents if I could start going to this church to kind of get away from some of the community that was involved with this past boyfriend. And they said, hey, as long as it's a Bible-believing church and, you're learning good things, then we are okay with that. And by Easter time, I started going around Thanksgiving time. And by Easter time, my whole family was there. And I got accepted into the BFA program at Missouri State. And so I was going to go and do the Broadway thing. And I got into college. And it was in that moment that my worship pastor at the time came up to me and said, hey, no one knows this yet, but we're actually launching a campus in Springfield. Would you want to be a part of the launch team and serve on the worship team in Springfield? And as a 19-year-old girl, I was like, heck yes, help launch a church at 19 and get to go and do theater full time. This is the best thing ever. Thank you, God. So shout out John and Melissa. Thank you so much for just getting me connected with the Springfield campus and for encouraging me to do that, because it could have been easy just to not make that connection and just hope that it happened, but it truly changed my life. So I moved to Springfield, and it was to start school and also help launch this church. But just like I said, those two spots were being fought for, theater and Jesus. But the reason being is because theater was my life. I feel like I need to touch on that a little bit. Theater from the age of 3, when I started that first tap ballet class, and then doing my first show at 6, from 6 on, theater was my thing. It was my life. But not only did it become my life, but I got really good at it. And I feel weird talking about that, because I never want to come across as being prideful or whatever, but it's the truth. I was pretty good at it. I started receiving a lot of recognition for it when I was in high school, winning awards and, on a state level, and then, a national level, and all the things. And so this was leading me in the trajectory to wanting to pursue this BFA. And a BFA is a Bachelor's of Fine Arts in musical theater. And for those who aren't in the theater world, BFA programs are super difficult to get into. And there's certain ones that are more difficult to get into, but your typical BFA program accepts around 12 to 24 guys and 12 to 24 girls a year. And that's it. And my program was one of those ones that accepted 12 girls and 12 guys. And sometimes they can adjust the numbers where, there may be a little bit more girls or a little bit more guys, but typically it's 12 girls, 12 guys. And so when I got accepted to Missouri State, and it was becoming a very prestigious program, I was ecstatic. So hearing that, Life Church was coming, that was just a cherry on top. But I honestly thought that was just going to be something I helped out with. Maybe I can fill a couple of volunteer hours. Super excited. But this is my bread and butter. This is what I've been working for since I was a little kid. I wanted to see my name in lights. And honestly, I could see it. It was looking that way. I was grinding enough to where I knew I was going to put the work in to make it happen, but also I was getting the recognition where I was starting to understand I'm pretty good. I could do this. And so after getting into that BFA program, I walked in with a little bit of like, yeah, like I got this thing. And I started school, and nothing will humble you more than joining a BFA program, because everyone thinks that they are the big, like they are the best of the best, but really you're just a big fish in a little pond. Then all of those big fish come and join the top programs, and you're looking around and you're like, oh my gosh, everyone is so good. But then that just motivates you to get even better. And so all of my time, all of my thoughts, all of my efforts were on this goal of I'm going to become the best performer that I possibly can, and I'm going to make it. And I got this sense of acceptance from that. Getting up on a stage and, getting that applause, I thought, okay, this is how I am accepted. This is how I'm loved. This is what I'm good at. And so it became a part of my identity. So during the weekdays, that's what I would do. But then on Wednesday nights and on Sundays, I would go and help with the worship team. And I loved it. I loved it. And thankfully, the worship pastor there, Caitlin, she took me under her wing and she started mentoring me, and she saw through. She saw through the bubbly, bubblegum pop personality, theatrical thing that I put off, and she saw my heart. And she started mentoring me and asking me the hard questions and challenging me and forcing me to take accountability. And it was through that I started noticing, okay, wait, why am I starting to feel more fulfilled, and why am I feeling more purposeful talking to these 6th grade girls at Switch or stacking the chairs than I am at dance? This is the thing that's always given me that feeling. So why is that starting to change? It's not dwindling, but why is it starting to change? And I slowly heard this whisper from the Holy Spirit that I was being called into ministry, that I was being called into this life of not performing, not getting applause, not being in the spotlight, but serving other people. And I put it off. I was like, well, yeah, like, no, my ministry is me moving to New York. My ministry is being on Broadway. Like, the people on Broadway, the people in New York need Jesus too. Duh. And like, I know so many of my friends who know Jesus, love Jesus, fear Jesus, are following Jesus. And they're also in New York and doing the Broadway thing. And I know that they are called to that. And they do it so well. If I would have done that, it would have been out of pride. It would have been out of a selfish ambition, and it honestly would have been disobedient. And so I knew that he was calling me towards that, but I was just like, but no, but like, this is what I've been going for like my entire life. Like, this is what people know me for at home. This is what my parents have like invested time and money and like picking me up at the late rehearsals, and like, this is what I'm good at. And then COVID hit. And we all know what happened when COVID hit. We had to sit at home with our feelings, and those things that we were avoiding, the things that are muffled underneath the hustle and bustle of life, were now right in front of us, and we had to face it. And mine was, what am I called to? And who am I going to serve? Myself or the Lord? Am I going to continue to ignore this and be disobedient and probably go and be successful and have a great life? And you know what? Maybe life change would have happened if I would have gone that route. Or am I going to take a step of faith, humble myself, and give up what I had been wanting and dreaming of my entire life and lay it down for God's plans. And so I called up Caitlin. I was like, I think I'm supposed to go into pastoring. I don't know. I think I'm supposed to go into worship ministry. I don't know. And she's like, yeah, welcome to the club. We all have been feeling that for about a couple years now. But she said something that was so profound, and I don't even know if she would remember this. Caitlin, if you're watching, I don't know if you would remember this, but thank you for saying this because it genuinely directed me, and it's what I needed to hear. She said, Ady, how are you expecting God to open the door or close the door to this next season of your life if you won't even go near the door? Ask him the questions. Seek his face. Seek his heart. Ask that his will is made known to you, and he will answer you. And it may not be the answer that you're wanting or desiring, but it's going to be so much better than anything that you could conjure up yourself. And so I did, and I knew what he was asking of me. It was my time to step away. It was my time to close that chapter of my life and to walk into this unknown season. And it was really difficult, and it was really confusing for a lot of people that were around me. And I know that there were a lot of people in my life who said behind my back and also to my face that I was making a mistake and that it was just out of fear. And it was because I thought I couldn't make it. It was because of this. It was because of that. Y'all, the harder choice would have been to stay because I knew that that would have been so disobedient. And it was scary. And I thought, oh my gosh, am I going to lose a part of my identity? Are people going to love me anymore? But man, it felt so good when I finally was walking in that obedience and knowing that I was walking with the Lord and doing what he was calling me to do. However, let me make a note. Although that felt good, and although I knew I was being obedient to him, that next season of my life was a desert season. It was hard. It was refining. I got a job at a church, and it was a really difficult season. There was a lot of pride that we had to unpack, obviously, from my performing days. But there was a lot of unhealthy leadership and just different things that I was causing, things that I wasn't causing, and a lot of spiritual attack on my life. And so I was starting to question things all over again, but I knew, I was trying to stand firm on, God, I know that you're calling me to this. I know that there's a purpose in this season. Through that difficult season, I got to meet my husband, and that makes it all worth it. There's been so much good that has come from that season, but the best of it is you. And that is a story I genuinely mean that. I do. That is a story for another time. I can't wait to share our story someday on this podcast and share just how God has shown himself through his story, my story, the blending of the two, how we met. We genuinely were set up on a blind date. We got married, and now we have a son, and I'm a mom, and I'm a wife, and my husband works for Life Church. Give glory to God. But my life looks so different than what I thought it was going to. And, I wish I could say that I have this, I could tie it up in a bow and this is how the story ends and this is, and I got that ministry job and life was so easy. But I don't have that ministry job. I'm not on Broadway. I'm not on a platform. I'm not on staff at a church, but I'm a mom and I'm a wife. And I think what I've realized is more than those big moments, speaking at women's conferences, more than performing in front of thousands of people. What God desires from me, and I feel like what he desires out of a lot of us, is the daily faithfulness, is the submission of letting go of the reins and accepting that his plans are so much more, so much better, so much higher than ours. And the life change that I have been able to see through our marriage, through being a pastor's wife, through being a mom and engaging with other mothers, through being a friend, through the odd and end jobs that I've had, is so powerful. And I still feel so humbled that he would choose me for that. And I am such a different person than I was in high school, in college, in my early 20s, than I am now. And it's all a testament to God. I was a broken, codependent, shame-filled girl who fell before... Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional. Who fell before the cross and said, I know that no one can heal me the way you can. No one can fulfill me. No one can fill that void the way you can. And so here I am. Here I am. Do with me what you want. I want to do what you want me to do. And he has taken me from brokenness to literally dancing before him in worship. He's taken me from feeling so ashamed of my past to speaking into so many girls' lives and being able to testify of his goodness, of his healing power, how he literally took trauma away from me, how he inserted people into my life, counselors, mentors into my life to help me through the things that were harder to let go of. And I know that he can do that for you. I know he can. And whether I am a stay-at-home wife, pastor's wife, mom for the rest of my life, and this podcast just reaches a couple of people or eventually fades in the busyness of life, I know that he is enough and that he is pleased with me, and that his name is so much greater than Ady Shaw or Ady Wheeler. So I need to gather myself and then I'll do. I want to end by speaking to the person who's maybe watching from your screen or listening in and is feeling a whole lot like how I felt. You're feeling weighed down by the weight of your sin. You're feeling ashamed, like you've done too much, afraid that someone is going to find out the real you, who can't identify themselves past who they are to other people, who feels like the most interesting part about them is something that they do or they can offer another person. God loves you. God sees you, and he doesn't want anything else, anything that you can offer him He just wants you. All of you. It says in his word that he has canceled the record of the charges against us by nailing them to the cross. And that is what he does when we call on his name. Call on his name. Call on his name. He met me exactly where I was, and he will meet you exactly where you are. You don't have to be defined by who you are to other people, by what other people say about you, to you, what you do or can offer. You are a child of God. And so when you come to him and you fall on your face before him, whether literally or metaphorically, but you just say, "Here I am, God," that is when he can start to really move. And it may be uncomfortable. It doesn't mean that everything's gonna be easy, but man, it means that he's gonna be there. That's what meant so much to me, and it still means so much to me. I just wanted someone to be there. Someone that wouldn't leave me. Someone that couldn't be unreliable. Someone who would take advantage of me. No. He was there. And he proved to me and he showed me that he was always there. But when I joined hand in hand with him, man, I could never turn back. I could never turn back. I hope that you got something from this podcast. I know it was clunky at parts, maybe, but I hope you felt the power of Jesus in my story, because that's what it is. It's a testament to who he is and what he's done. So I hope that you'll join us for episode 3. I'm going to invite someone, a special guest, to interview, and we are just going to continue to learn and grow together. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.